It is time for another class guide, and this class guide is going to be about the Bard. The Bard. So the Bard class is kind of interesting. I think it gets the attention of early game players probably, and that's what happened with me. Bard class was the first class that I really jumped into and fell in love with, and it was really about this. So the Bardic Inspiration trait here, it's giving all yellow allies one stat every turn. So when you're first starting out the game, when you have very low stats, one stat every turn is very intense. Like your mana generation is probably not that fast. Your troops generally don't have that much stats to begin with, so like one every turn is very exceptional. So early game, like running a Bard class is kind of like a shortcut to just having scaling teams that can get you to beat teams that are much better than you in PvP, for instance, just because you're able to scale above them. That's kind of the trick with the Bard class. Immune to silence is kind of nice, however silence isn't something you generally have to worry about too much. There's not a ton of silence troops that are out there that are getting too much use these days, and this Wildfolk bond is kind of whatever. So we have to, think about that stat building thing as kind of the theme for the Bard class. And then we get to the talents. It's kind of this unfortunate weird mix of stuff. So Arcane Tree is always kind of nice because you get 20% spell reduction, so this is kind of nice from a survivability perspective. Unfortunately, that's really the only protection we get from the Bard class. We do get 50% mana start if you want it. There's a troop that can potentially help us in this arena as well, which is why I do not have it ticked at the moment. However, we do get 50% mana start, so you can at least get that. And then, you can have the ability to either get bonus purple mana if you want it, the enchanting on greens if you want it, all allies starting with 15% mana if you want it. There's kind of maybe reasons you'd potentially pick any of these. All of the 100 talents are not very good. Commander is pretty good. I mean, it's +2 to all in the first position, so this isn't the worst thing on the planet. So it's kind of a weird mix, like I said. It's all these weird little statty bump things and 50% mana start if you want it and 20% spell reduction. So the class doesn't really give us a ton to work with. There's no protection from skull damage, there's no barriers on browns, there's no exploding gems on 4/5s, there's no storms that are being summoned or conjured as a result of running the class. So we're kind of missing a lot of tools that help teams really get going. So really the thing that we have to truly work around is this +1 to all yellow every turn thing. And the fact that we can start with a little bit of skills when we're in the first slot, and we can at least get some 5 bonus attack here. So you can kind of start with a pretty decently high attack when you're running with the Bard. But again, we're trying to build around this +1 stat every turn thing. So the Bard class is a Wildfolk class. Wildfolk troops tend to be kind of quirky, which I think is really, the theme of the Bard class. There's a lot of weird little things you can do with the Bard class. So let's check out some troops. So when it comes to troops, there's kind of this interesting stuff going on. So we can look at troop type Wildfolk just to get a sense of who they think we belong with. So when we're looking at Wildfolk, we kind of just see a lot of crazy, weird people. And it's in the name. It's Wildfolk, right? So Wild Queen is creating tons of mana, tons of skulls, stealing attack. She's also someone that synergizes with Wildfolk in the sense that they'll get 2 attack at the start of every turn. So if you're running this with Bard class, that'll actually give all Wildfolk 3 attack extra turn every turn. So if you're looking for some kind of attack stacking lineup, Wild Queen could be there. She gets no benefit from the yellow stat pumping piece herself, but every other Wildfolk that's yellow at least would get extra 2 attack at the start of every turn. So interesting but weird, which is thematic. Tian Yi is, of course, also very odd. In terms of what they do, it's kind of awkward. They're stealing 1 magic from the first enemy at the start of every turn, so they'll essentially gain 2 magic at the start of every turn. They're dealing splash damage and stunning basically 3 people, assuming you aim it correctly. I mean, this troop is also kind of weird. They also summon a bunch of monkey disciples, which is also kind of weird. King Silencius is very noteworthy in the sense that he's giving all Wildfolk 50% mana start. He's also got a very decent boost ratio here, boosted by Wildfolk allies. So if you ran a pure Wildfolk lineup, you'd get an extra 24. Generally, you're probably not going to run pure Wildfolk because pure Wildfolk is not the most cohesive team. They're kind of missing some things that you would want. However, if you are just looking to get everyone that 50% mana start, King Silencius is your dude. His damage is okay as well, so that's not the worst thing on the planet. He exists. Luna's kind of fun because she does this exploding a random gem when you match yellow. so that fits pretty nicely with Bard in the sense that you're probably going to be trying to match yellows very frequently. Her spell effect is very Bard and very Wildfolk in the sense that it's doing damage to all, which is kind of fine, but then it's also doing 1 to 2 status effects to all enemies or 1 to 2 status effects to all allies. So she can potentially like silence and entangle everybody, or like, you know, bless and barrier everybody. She can do a lot of weird stuff. She's kind of this weird troop, but from a mana generation perspective, this thing actually does help a decent amount. So she's someone that's kind of fun to try and put into lineups, kind of sneaky, kind of weird. And then you kind of just have a bunch of other random Wildfolk that all kind of do weird other stuff, but those are probably the most noteworthy when it comes to that. Then separately to just staring at Wildfolk, we kind of have to look at anyone who's yellow. So anyone who's yellow is someone that can theoretically fit within a Bard lineup, since these people are all going to scale. People that we're going to care the most about are people that have like attack abilities or healing abilities that are going to scale per turn. Aquaticus, for instance, will scale her damage. Arachnid Weaver will also scale his damage, also scale its damage, scale its damage, scale its damage. So it's kind of, you can see how you could theoretically do a lot with pretty much all of these troops. There's actually very noteworthy people in here. Scaling stats is not going to be the worst thing on the planet. But the thing that, again, that we're missing is that there's no storms running, so it's kind of a little awkward for some of these troops. Mana generation is something that we're going to have to fight for. We don't have any like natural skills to try and generate mana here. Unfortunately, there's not a ton of weapons that are very good at generating yellow mana that fit with the Bard class either. Since it's a Wildfolk type, a lot of the mixed weapons are not really going to be all that applicable, if at all applicable. So we're kind of stuck with just thinking, you know, if I'm going to try and scale per turn, theoretically you would want to build a very turtling kind of lineup because you would want the game to last a while. So Queen Aurora, for instance, kind of sticks out because she's going to turtle the heck out of a game by giving everyone barrier, giving everybody life. The life part of this is going to scale. The life part of that's also going to scale because it scales every time you cast a spell. So Queen Aurora is somebody that can fit pretty nicely in Bard lineups. Voice of Orpheus could be kind of fun in these lineups because his damage piece is going to scale. He also gives you a lot of cleansing on yellow, and since we're going to be trying to match yellow a lot, he's somebody that can kind of fit. If you want to be a total butt, you could put Queen Aurora and Voice of Orpheus on the same team with some other kind of yellow converter, and then all of a sudden you've just got like infinite life, always cleansed, and then you just figure out some way to do damage. You could do something like that. But Divine Ishbala, of course, is pretty cool. She's converting a bunch of things into yellow, so greens turns into yellows, and then she gets you some skull damage. Since Bard class gets some naturally higher attack in PvP, at least, with that first talent that we were looking at, and then +1 every turn. That can be kind of fun because your hero in the top slot can be doing a lot of damage. The Divines starting with all 40% mana, there's a decent amount of yellow Divines that we were just looking at a second ago. Divinia is a yellow Divine, for instance. Voice of Orpheus is a yellow Divine. Ubistet is a yellow Divine. So there's Divines in here that you're going to care about starting with 50% mana. Queen Aurora, as I mentioned, is also a Divine. So that's kind of fun. So again, anyone that's yellow and has the potential to scale is a very good partner to go with the Bard class. However, people that aren't good with the Bard class are just general converters. So like Forest Guardian as an example, him getting +1 to every stat is really not all that interesting and useful from a Bard point of view because nothing scales here. So like him getting more magic is really not that interesting, like at all. So you're pretty much just scaling this stuff. So scaling this stuff is fine, but the spell effect is never really going to get any stronger. Your troop is just going to get a little more survivable and slightly do more damage, like per turn. So this isn't really taking the best advantage of the Bard class. We want to be finding people, again, that have these pretty little purple numbers. That means they're going to actually get affected by this stat pumping thing. So that's kind of it from like a troop perspective. It's kind of the world is your oyster as far as what you can try and build in there. But again, the types of lineups that seem to work best with Bard are ones where you're turtling up, because turtling up is what the Bard class gets the most benefit from. Early game, you can kind of build whatever and it's going to work as long as you have yellow troops. Late game, you have to be very specific about trying to turtle up. Lastly, I'll just mention that, of course, there's a couple troops that are very fun to have. So Mercy is somebody that's very nice with Bard just because she's converting stuff into yellow, and then she's also cleansing everybody and gaining life. She's not going to get any stat boosts by being, blue-green like this. However, the fact that you have a way of turning purples into yellows, creating more yellows, and then cleansing everybody, this is very nice and a very nice partner for a Bard, for instance. Same idea with Moonrabbit. So Moonrabbit's doing converting all blues into yellows and then giving everybody on your team life, and then blessing the hero in the first slot, if the hero is in the first slot. And it's empowered, of course, and it's a little survivable. But again, no benefit from the Bard +1 to every turn. It's just somebody that can really help you get some yellow mana going. So when we look at some teams that are out here that I made a Bard AF team, which to me is the most Bardy of Bard teams you can really kind of have. And the reason for this is that we're using Luna, who's super Bard as far as I'm concerned, and you can pretty much just say Bard equals Wildfolk in my mind. She's super duper Bard. You're getting the exploding things as we mentioned, and she's creating a lot of random status effects, so she's super Bard-like. King Silentius is just giving all Wildfolk 50% mana start, so this will allow us on the Bard himself, or herself, to not have to take the actual mana source talent. We can actually take something else. So in this instance, I'm going to take the +3 magic. Normally I would take 50%, but since we're running King Silentius, we'll be running it with Tactician, for instance. And then we've got Moonrabbit here is really just there to kick the whole thing off. So the Staff of Astra, if you haven't seen it, this is cleansing all allies and giving all allies 28 life. So between Moonrabbit and the Staff of St. Astra here, we're going to have tons and tons of life. We're also gaining a stat every single turn on the top 3 troops. Everyone's getting life, everyone's getting cleansed. Luna's there to help with mana generation on top of Moonrabbit. And it's basically just a turtley team that just does lots of weird stuff. Like Luna casting can either make your game super easy, super fast, or you might have to turtle it out a little bit. But you can definitely turtle super hard with this team. So here's an example of the most Bard-ass Bard team here, doing some stuff against a classic Life and Death team. We get some explosions because of Luna with yellow, so let's see what happens. Bye! So now we've got Moonrabbit, so we do Moonrabbit, and then we can just go ahead and cleanse everybody and heal everybody. As you can probably tell, this is going to be a long fight. And now, lo and behold, we have our sad little Life and Death, all by his lonesome. Oh, poor little man. Good night, my sweet prince. So that's an example of how the Bard class can really just kind of last forever, and I think this really highlights really what the Bard class does best, which is just be outlasting, outliving, and scaling forever and ever and ever. So if you have a fight that goes on forever, that's a fun old team you can try. It's not very quick, but you probably are going to win. Other teams that we got going on here, so this is a very classic combination. It's a little cheeky and cheesy, but it's Rope Dart with Ubistet. So the fun thing about Rope Dart and Ubistet is that as long as you cast Rope Dart once, whoever you Ubistet after that is dead, and somebody else is dead. So you basically make it a 4-on-2 like right away when you run this kind of a team. It's a little bit overkill with having 2 people that are making yellow. However, since we're not running anything like a Divine Ishbala, for instance, this is going to take Ubistet a little more time to get started. You could theoretically just run this with Divine Ishbala, instead of Moonrabbit. So if you wanted to run a team like that, it would basically just look like this. And then that would get you going pretty good. You'd have tons of yellow mana generation. I'd probably even run it like that. Tons of yellow mana generation. No, I'd run it like that. Tons of yellow mana generation, extra turns, looping, super quick and easy dirty kills with Ubistet. A team like this can be pretty vicious. Again, lots of free kills. So that's kind of fun. I'm going to run it like that, final answer. For a medium team, you've got something more like this. So this is taking advantage of the class weapon that's out there. A Harpy Mage is going to help us get a Storm running, so that way we can take advantage of Queen Xochi. So that's kind of cool, and that's also going to help us get this whole thing going with triple damage on Taloka. So this team is basically just like, create lots of mana with Harpy Mage, more mana with Enchanting. On this one, you can kind of cleanse everybody and yourself if you're running this weapon, and you have it all the way upgraded. You barrier yourself, which is kind of fun. It doesn't cleanse itself, though, so that's something you need to watch out for. It's all other allies. So these people all get enchanted and cleansed. You'll stay whatever nasty debuffs you got going on yourself. But lots of mana generation, lots of passive damage here with Taloka, lots of scaling damage with Queen Xochi here with Bard class. Harpy Mage isn't getting affected by Bard too much. This exploding thing, and you pretty much blow up all the gems that you could, so scaling this doesn't really help it all that much. But again, you're just getting, scaling stats with all this fun stuff, so, the amount that you're going to heal yourself is going to scale a lot. The damage that you're going to do with Queen Xochi is going to scale. So this team, pretty decent from a medium level team perspective. From a low team perspective, this is taking advantage of Elwyn. So Elwyn is someone that if you complete the Pansvale quest line, you're going to get him. And what's cool about him is that his boost ratio is bananas. So someone with a bananas boost ratio like this, him also scaling his damage every turn is going to help things out. And then we're running 2 people that are just making yellow. So between Mercy making a ton of yellow, Moonrabbit also making more yellow, this person enchanting, Elwyn should have all the opportunities in the world to take advantage of this boost ratio for every yellow you destroy in a row and column. So the amount of damage you should be doing with just Elwyn is pretty cool. And then on top of that, you'll be scaling your attack with your hero, so you'll be able to smack people down pretty good. So from a low-level team, that's what's going on there. So overall, I'd say the Bard class really shines at the lower levels. Again, at the higher levels, that's kind of where we run into situations where there's other classes that can do fun stuff with yellow that I would argue are generally better to be using. So as an example, a class that I would generally think of when I'm thinking of yellow mana, for instance, would be someone like a priest, for instance. A priest is somebody that is going to heal all people every turn. This heal thing doesn't take them above their max, but you're getting bonus yellow here. You're also in the talent trees getting even more bonus yellow if you get it all the way up to here. So that's kind of fun. You're also getting cleansing for yourself on every 4/5. You also get to heal everybody on 4/5. So that's kind of cool. And they also have a Lightstorm start, which is kind of fun. And they're also Divine type, which kind of fits more nicely with a bunch of other things. So Priest is somebody that you could potentially be running. Somebody else that I generally think of when I think of yellow mana is War Priest. So War Priest is kind of fun because they're a tanky frontliney kind of troop, so 40% skull reduction, and then the ability to stun a random enemy at the start of your turn. This is not the best, but it's not the worst. 50% is at least a decent chance to do it. But on top of that, they have the same healing everybody on 4/5s. They also can get a Lightstorm start. They can also get bonus yellow if you so much want that. But they have a little more utility that they're bringing to the table on top of the Bard. So what you're trading in stat gaining, like per turn, which is very slow, you're gaining the ability to kind of survive, get mana faster, have a Lightstorm start. So I think this class kind of does things with yellow mana a little better. So anytime you're running a Bard class, the best reason to be running it is that you're trying to turtle and make a game last forever. There's no real bells and whistles about the Bard class themselves that makes them especially lethal or anything like that. It's just trying to take advantage of this the most is kind of what you're after. So that's everything Bard. An interesting class. I would say as far as an endgame class goes, it's really not the best. It's something that could be extremely circumstantial. However, from an early game class perspective, I think it's like A++. It's one of the best. Even though you should be focusing on other classes to level early on, if you're just trying to get some early success as far as PvP grinding, and you're not necessarily having the troops that you want to be building something with a classic Titan or a Frost Mage or a Sentinel, one of those classes that you're probably going to want to try and level first, Bard is definitely a very useful one to jump in there, get some sneaky PvP wins, because you'll be scaling much higher than the enemy team is going to, which will just make you live longer, kill more, win more, just win maybe a little slower. But that is all for the Bard class. Key Lime out. Make sure you like, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. Okay, bye.